Right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is where you are. Thanks for joining us. I'm Alan Walker, founder, editor, and co-host of Chat Talent. Before we do too much, before we go too far, can somebody in the chat tell me whether or not they can hear at least me and see all four of us? We'll wait with bated breath. Hello, everyone. We'll take that as a sign. Yeah, cool. Okay, let's crack on. So anything else that goes wrong today is my fault entirely as the host. And on that note, we're also going live to LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope, if that works. So if you're watching on any of those platforms, I hope the magic of live streaming is working. Last time we did that, I was behind the camera, this time in front. So let's hope I'm not screwed it up. So we've got a really cool session for you today, I think. Our title is From Crisis to Confidence, How to Embrace Adversity and Future-Proof Your Organisation, which I recognise is a bit of a mouthful. But what's really important is what we're going to cover off today. So I'm really pleased to be joined by a stellar lineup of people that have an embarrassingly greater amount of knowledge about the world of employer branding and candidate engagement and attraction than I do. More on those guys shortly. We're going to be talking about coming out of a crisis into a position of strength, why having a strong brand is so important during these times, how employers need to think about engaging with talent differently, and the even bigger role that tech will play in the future, and a whole heap of other stuff, I'm sure. But today isn't about listening to me, not too much anyway. It's about you, our audience, and our fantastic speakers. And on that first point, although this is a panel discussion and I've got loads of questions for these guys, we'd like today's session to be super interactive. We're as interested in your opinions and questions as you are, hopefully, ours. The Crowdcast platform lets us do three cool things, so how you can get involved. Number one, you can chat amongst yourselves, which you're already doing on the right of the screen. Number two, you can ask our panelists questions through the Q&A button at the bottom. Please do that. When we get to the end of the initial panel discussion, I'm going to go to those questions and start to ask the guys some more. And number three, we're going to ask you your opinion on a couple of topics via polls, which are also at the bottom. And an ask rather than housekeeping, if any of you can share your favourite part of today's session on LinkedIn and use the hashtag #GiveAndGet. Is that right, Charlotte?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. You'll be entered into a draw to win a copy of Charlotte and Bryan's book. And if you also use the hashtag #ChatTalent, I'll throw in a little something extra to whoever wins. So I'm almost done with my tediously long intro. For those of you who are still here and have had the stamina to stick around, let's get this show on the road. I'm sure most of you know my fellow screen inhabitants and our panel, but for the few that might not, let's do a quick round of intros. I always struggle with who to ask first in these situations. But as we have an ABC and Ali, Bryan and Charlotte, let's reverse things alphabetically. Charlotte, over to you. Who are you? What do you do?
Hi, I'm Charlotte Marshall. I work at Danaher Corporation as the Global Employer Brand Leader. I am the co-author of the Employer Brand book, Give and Get.
Excellent. Hence the hashtag. Bryan, who are you and what do you do?
So I'm the other co-author of Give and Get Employer Branding, and I'm Chief Delegation Officer at PH Creative, a global employer brand agency.
Love that title. And last, no, definitely not least, Ali, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name's Ali Hackett. I'm co-founder at recruitment technology business Meet and Engage. I'm not a technologist by background. This is relatively new for me, so the last 5 years. So we've lived in the virtual world for a while. But my background is 20 years in resourcing and employer brand. Great to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Intro's made, awkwardness over. We're all now fabulous friends. Let's crack on. So first things first, I'm aware you guys have been very patient while we've all introduced ourselves and I've rattled on. So let's kick things off with a quick poll. You should see this at the bottom of your screens. I say should, as this is the very first time I've done it. I'm just going to unhide the first poll. Tell me whether it suddenly miraculously appears if you click on polls. Fingers crossed. Otherwise, the poll thing has failed miserably. Can you see it, panel?
See it? What has
Can
been
you
the
vote? Can you answer?
There's a red dot with a 1 in it.
Yeah, let's click on it and hopefully not
Let's
exit
click on
by
it
accident.
and see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Votes are coming in. So anybody watching, if you click on polls at the bottom and then cast your votes on what has been the hardest issue for you to tackle since the COVID outbreak, that'd be wonderful. So the options there, for those that aren't in yet, are first option is redesigning your recruitment strategy to become more virtual. Second is freezing or cutting back on your hiring plans. Number 3 is around ensuring the continuity and execution of your employer brand strategy. And the last one, and the one that's getting by far the most votes at the moment, is keeping candidates informed and engaged with the most up-to-date information.
Cool.
So that's really interesting. I think there we've probably seen the result, given how many people we've got on the session, and it's going to be that one around keeping candidates informed and engaged with the most up-to-date information, which, I don't know, panel, were you surprised by that? Was that what you expected to see?
That's what I voted for in my
Yeah.
day in the hardest challenge.
What about you, Brian?
To be honest, I would have expected the first answer to have a few more votes, but equally, I wouldn't have been surprised by an equal split. There's just so many challenges that the current situation throws up.
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Ali?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I'm not surprised to see it there at all. And I think organisations are really trying to max out on comms at the moment, but also it's actually knowing what to say and when. You know, it's such a fluid landscape. People don't have all the right information at the time they want it. So it's a real challenge.
Excellent. So let's I've got a whole heap of questions I want to ask you guys, and I'm going to try and spread them out evenly. Charlotte, I wanted to kick off with you. Your book and Brian's book is titled Give and Get Employer Branding, which alone was enough to kind of pique my interest when I first saw it pop up on the Amazon store, just the title itself. So what is Give and Get, a Give and Get employer brand, and what does it mean exactly?
It's a new and novel approach to employer branding. And as somebody who's spent her career building employer brands, this will be the 6th employer brand that I've built at a Fortune 500 company. The first 4 I built followed a very conventional method. And that's one where you partner with an agency and you try to bottle the magic of your organization and use your employer brand as a magnet to attract more talent to your organization. And you do it by broadcasting your strengths, your benefits, and your opportunities. And guess what? It works. But it also creates another heap of challenges on the back end of that, and that's a massive influx of unqualified candidates coming into your funnel. So after having done that 4 times over, when I went to Magellan Health several years ago, I looked for a new way to approach my work. Not only did I want to attract, but I also wanted to control the volume and start to impact the quality of the applicant coming in. And that's where Brian and I met. I engaged his agency, PH Creative, and I said, how do I solve this? And he said, with the give and the get. And instead of a one-way value proposition, it's simply a 2-way mutual value exchange. Rather than just toting the strengths, benefits, and opportunities, you also clearly articulate the expectations, the cultural norms, and some of the demands and expectations your organization has of your associates. And in doing so, giving all that information on the front end, you actually repel the many and compel the few who are well matched to your organization's culture.
So, because having too many candidates is a huge problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the time when I was dealing with the problem, it was a really large company. Overnight, we became an attractive, great place to work. And the team started calling and saying, okay, you need to call and start looking at AI and other technology. We cannot deal with the volume that's coming in. And it simply created another problem. So that's the one thing. It's just the tacticality of it. But the second, we all know the hidden cost of a declined candidate. We reject 99% of people that apply for our jobs. So the risk goes up pretty exponentially if you can't guarantee a stellar candidate experience. So mitigating against that, controlling the volume, getting what you need, but reducing all of that excess. It's been really an interesting thing for me to work. It's changed the way that I approach my work completely. It's not only helped me attract what I need, but in doing so, the quality has gone up so significantly. And what should also happen is longer term, you have less new hire attrition. So it not only spans the attraction, but also the engagement and retention side of EB.
Makes sense. I've seen it described, though, that idea of both attracting and repelling at the same time as being quite disruptive. For me, that kind of makes common sense. So why is it disruptive?
It's disruptive because it's not the way that anyone is doing it. And if you look at the roots of employer brand, it came from traditional consumer marketing. And in consumer marketing, it's a really linear transaction. Anyone who will pay for this price can have it. Well, when you look at employer brand, everyone who applies for a job can't have that job. It's much more like online dating than it is online selling. So it needed a new and novel approach.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Ali, the world has changed quite a lot over the last 3 months. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Even for someone like me who's lived in a bit of a bubble of around HR tech most of the time anyway, even pre-COVID. And I've been a home worker for pretty much 5 years anyway. But I can still see that things really are not the same. How has it impacted the way employers are engaging with talent?
I think, well, first to say that, TA teams have always been pulled in a kind of a million different directions, and now more so than ever. So trying to do a really tricky job in a really strange time when there's kind of great uncertainty, it's a fluid landscape. And, I think it's worth just saying that for the record, it's a really hard time. I think smart leaders generally are the ones who are really focusing on supporting and enabling their team, so helping them to function, helping them to adapt. And obviously these are the people that are articulating your employer brand, so your employer proposition. So you really need to support them to get them into the best place possible. So, that kind of empathy and understanding, it goes a long way anyway, but, particularly in a time of crisis. So, to your point, I suppose, what we're seeing is employers swapping out physical for virtual, no surprise there really. I guess organisations are looking at the hiring requirements that remain, and they're trying to understand how to digitise more of the process. So it might be that, where a blended process was in place previously, there are kind of point solutions being dropped in quite quickly. So that might be video interviewing, for instance, inserting a solution into the recruitment journey. I mean, what really interests me, and to me, what the smart organisations are doing to engage with talent, is looking at kind of what they've done previously and trying to understand actually what can we now do better, what can we do more of. And they tend to be the ones with quite a well curated recruitment tech stack already. But it's about, so how can we take it to the next level? And for me, I've kind of made 3 observations across our client base. We work with kind of 60 or so global brands, and the sort of observation number 1 is around personalization, which is kind of no surprise, but what does my audience want right now, and how can I provide that to them? So a really good example is in the consulting space. One of our clients, they've started running really brilliant skills-based sessions for their audience. So this is predominantly students, for student recruitment, campus recruitment, how to build a great LinkedIn profile, how to build a personal brand, how to stand out from the crowd. So actually, really thinking about what they can deliver to their particular segment. Also using technology to break down barriers. So, there are still shocking statistics around young people from disadvantaged backgrounds losing confidence through the recruitment process. So how can you use technology to create something that is inclusive and supportive? So that whole personalization piece is number 1. The second point is really around adding in additional layers of thoughtful comms. So kind of to the first point of the poll, really, people are unsure what they can tell candidates because there's not much to say, or it might be that we can have an intake on the start date we thought, or we might need to push it back, we don't know. But the key is making sure that you're able to provide additional comms to candidates, making sure that you're keeping them up to speed. We've seen some great use cases of organisations using kind of like drop-in one-to-one recruiter chats, those sorts of things. And then making sure that you're also trying to be flexible around candidate requirements. So we're all juggling so much at the moment, parents, work, real everything. So if your candidates can't get online to engage with you, but you really need to make sure that you're creating some space for them, can you do that in the evening? Can you do that in the morning? So just turning those processes on their heads. And then the third and final point I would make is around, I guess, pivoting uses of automation. So, to my previous point, we need different information at different times. Automation is a great way of achieving this. We work with a bunch of RPOs and MSPs as well as employers. And one of our RPO clients used one of our chatbots to share messages with like 10,000 contractors about what to expect as all of their contracts changed in this kind of COVID landscape. So to me, those are the sort of three particular key areas: that personalization, additional layers of thoughtful comms, and that kind of pivoting use of automation.
And it's really interesting, isn't it? People always talk about, or used to always talk about, tech dehumanizing processes, whether it's a recruitment process or a consumer process. But actually, good tech used well can create a much richer, personalized experience for each and every single person going through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think also, you know, when we get into this kind of post-COVID landscape, whenever we get there, you know, are we going to want to go back to where we've been before? I mean, no, I don't think we are. There'll be some things that, you know, people will want to hold on to and for all the right reasons. But, you know, will we want to go back to queuing in a bank when we've worked out how to do online banking? Probably not.
Have you only just worked out how to do online banking, Ali?
Yeah, don't tell anyone. That's what I've used my lockdown for.
Brian, why do you think having a strong employer brand is more important during a crisis?
So I think it's important, full stop, but I think it's probably more valuable to an organization during a crisis. I actually think we'll look back on 2020 and we'll consider 2020 the year of employer brand for a variety of reasons. However, you know, they say true character is revealed under pressure, and I think it's fair to say that lots of organizations are under lots of pressure at the moment. You know, so not having you know, a coherent story and not understanding your employee experience and being relevant to your audience, you know, making a misstep from a communications point of view, you know, it can be a huge risk to your reputation. And I think, you know, how organizations are communicating with employees and candidates, you know, has the distinct possibility of creating a very long lasting legacy, good or for bad, you know, that organizations will have to live with for a very long time, you know. But, you know, apart from anything else, for those organizations without a formal EVP, now's a great time to find out what your employer brand is. You know, whether you think you've got one or you haven't, you have. You know,
Everyone has.
And you know, anything that impacts the perception or reality of the employee experience is employer brand. You know, but in a crisis specifically, with so much change, worry, uncertainty, volatility, you know, your employer brand in EVP is a huge opportunity to promote certainty, clarity, and familiarity, which is what your employees want most of all. In such uncertain times, you know, okay, what hasn't changed? You know, let's look at the guiding principles, the behaviors and the values that will always be the same. What are the propositions that we still stand by and you can rely on to get us from reality of now to the reality of tomorrow? You know, and from an external perspective, being able to move with agility to articulate the demands and expectations of the next normal as it changes is really important, because, you know, ultimately candidates are still really just looking for that ultimate question to be answered. Do I have what it takes to thrive at your organization? And then they can assess, do I want to? Is it worth the sacrifice and commitment? You know, so, you know, there's a variety of reasons. You know, apart from anything else at all, you know, an employer brand and an EVP gives you the ability to react to change strategically rather than tactically, you know, just putting fires out. And done well, this is a great opportunity to galvanize people with real impact, purpose, and belonging, you know. So I'm excited because there's never been a more socially acceptable time to be vulnerable for organizations. You know, so it is an opportunity to take a giant leap forward. You know, if you're not proud of your diversity or there's challenges and gaps in certain areas of the organizations, you know, you can lean into the harsh realities. And what we're finding, you know, we've been doing it this way for years, but what we're finding now is more examples of organizations being brave about the gaps, the vulnerabilities, the weaknesses, and they're winning from a reputation and brand perspective because people are ready for this level of authenticity. They're tired of brands bragging, you know, and just talking about strengths. And we don't buy it. We don't buy it as consumers anymore. And we certainly don't buy it as candidates or employees.
I think that authenticity. Is there also a challenge that some organizations may face that where we are right now is different to where we were 4 months ago? So there needs to be a change of thinking and maybe a change in the way things are described. And actually, you're describing different things in your organization because the working culture is different. But in 6 months' time, it could be different again. Not necessarily back to where it was 4 months ago, but it could be quite different to where it is now. How do teams deal with that?
Yeah, okay. So I love this question. Essentially, if you've done your homework and you've got it right, your employer brand should be the same. But the proposition, your EVP, might actually be out of date. As the reality of the employee experience changes, it's our job to make sure that what we're saying and promoting is still relevant. And that's the organic nature of moving with the times and making sure you've got the right tools to allow you to move through that strategically instead of reacting and tactically putting out fires.
Okay, so if you unpack that idea for a second, it's really interesting. Brian and I have chatted about this a lot. One of our predictions is the things that candidates cared most about pre-COVID, pre-George Floyd have changed pretty dramatically. So what once used to be the biggest strength of our organization could mean something entirely different from this day forward. Things like the company where I work, it's an extremely stable company. It has outperformed the S&P 500 by 5,000% for 25 years in a row. Company stability is one. Not every organization has that track record. I was on the phone the other day with an EV leader at an HVAC company. The purpose of what they're doing right now is the world reopens and the quality of air employees are breathing in their workspace has never mattered more. And it's probably safety. Safety might not have been what they led with before, but being able to communicate and share that value. I think agility is another one. How does your company pivot and protect your workforce during times like this? And then of course, virtual technology. Some people never want to go back into an office again. Can your company support that? If so, you might have a serious competitive advantage.
I think it was Groucho Marx that said, these are my principles, and if you don't like these, I've got others. The danger of not knowing your employer brand and EVP is thinking you're moving with agility, but actually you're just hopping and skipping from one thing to another. This is about knowing who you are as an organization, understanding the employer experience, and not necessarily changing, but dialing up and dialing down based on what your audience needs, prioritizes, and how the preferences change. So it's having that level of agility, but strategically, not tactically.
And having an answer to the question, candidates will come in after this and say, and what did you do to protect the health, safety, and well-being of your people during this? Don't have an answer and you don't have a story, you're going to lose out.
Yeah. And actually, that point there is really interesting because our next poll is very much around what matters to candidates. So I'm just going to open that one up to the audience and let's see what they think. So bear with.
My best Reese Witherspoon impersonation too.
So
cartoon.
the poll should be open now, guys. If you click on polls at the bottom again, the question is, in the next 6 to 12 months, what will matter most to candidates? The choices here are continued home-based / flexible working, a strong company culture, securing a higher salary, how a company treated employees during COVID-19, and a company's stability.
Oh, this is hard.
Yeah, it's going to be quite tight, this one.
Okay.
No one cares about money. That's interesting. No movement on that one.
All over money now.
Interesting.
I think health and safety, number one, right? So being able to stay home and not have someone else dictate what you're going to be exposed to something has to come number one.
It's really interesting on that point. I saw somebody posting about an advert that they'd seen that was advertised as home working or home based. And then there was a footnote right at the very bottom of the advert that said something along the lines of, yes, it's home based, but only until we say it isn't. When the crisis is over. So it's okay, so I could come into a job, do it for 3 months, do it in a perfectly satisfactory way that everyone's delighted with. But then once lockdown's over and everything COVID related has gone and everyone's moved on to the brave new world, you're going to force me to come into the office. Just kind of madness, that is.
Arbitrary at that point, doesn't it? It's just crazy,
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because at a certain point in my life, when my kids were younger, and if I'd been at home with them now during COVID, that kind of continued home-based flexible working would have been very appealing. And I understand why it is appealing for a lot of people. Although actually, maybe if we're thinking more universally about people who perhaps don't have the option to work from home and can't work flexibly, then I feel almost like from a more universal perspective, that kind of how a company treated employees during COVID feels like it's perhaps further reaching.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got pretty much a level pegging between continued home-based flexible working and that company stability. And those both make logical sense, I guess. Everyone's experiencing that home working, and then also everyone's reading in the press about companies being in challenging and difficult times. So it makes sense that those two leap out. Charlotte, we've heard there different opinions of what will matter to candidates, and somebody in the chat actually said, which probably loads of those things, to be brutally honest, they're all equally important. And even the money one, if we were asked whether that was important, it would be have a degree of importance, perhaps not the priority. But I think whatever we see there, I think what is universal is that organisations are tackling new challenges, new ways of working. How can they kind of lean into the kind of harsh reality of the current situation and turn that adversity into strength, do you think?
The opportunity for everybody is to communicate the why behind whatever the adversity is. So, and every organization is in a different state. Some are doing mass layoffs, so the people that are left behind have to pull more than their fair share of their workload. That's an example. If people don't know why they're doing it, they don't know why you laid off their best friends, and they don't know what is on the other side. If they all band together and conquer whatever the current challenge is, the chances of them being bought in are pretty low. But if a steer from Airbnb who laid off 25% of their workforce in one day and received such an influx of positive sentiment because there was so much vulnerability and transparency into why the decisions were made. So nobody was left feeling that things were unfair, they didn't know why decisions were made. And then those that were left behind wanted to see the company succeed. And it was a really difficult road ahead to come back from quite a few unknowns. But when you share those basic building blocks, and I know, Bryan, you've got a lot of really passionate examples behind this with your clients, it galvanizes your workforce together. And then when there are things that are pretty spectacular, the chance to celebrate those small wins, when you see the examples of the shared values and the behaviors internally first, not necessarily externally when most people think about employer brand, it galvanizes the culture as well. Dee, what would you add?
Well, I think the challenge is sort of context around this notion that organizations, the attention seems to exist within an organization between the financial stability and well-being of the organization and the well-being of people, and they sort of pull in different directions. We've seen lots of examples of that in the press, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate. But actually, if you take the time to overlay those things and find the commonality, typically, there might be a story such that, listen, there was 1,000 of us yesterday, there's 400 of us today. We still need to get our work done. We've lost our friends, and we need to work doubly hard. Work-life balance is going to go out the window, and we're all juggling kids at home and this, that, and the other. This is a challenge. Here's where we are now, and here's where we need to get to. It's not going to be easy, but if we pull together, we can get through this. So you can actually use the harsh realities as an opportunity to be a real authentic rally cry and galvanize people together, give them the sense of impact, show them the contribution and how it counts, remind them of the purpose of why they're doing it. And as people go through that kind of experience together, you'll be galvanized, and that sense of belonging gets stronger. So I would urge anybody looking for, rather than have that tension between those two things, look for the commonality, and therein lies the opportunity to galvanize people together, cultivate pride and passion, and also it's the quickest route to find story gold. Documenting this and telling the stories afterwards will be so powerful.
A little bit of empathy goes a long way. When my manager calls me for my weekly one-on-one, how you doing? How are the kids? How's homeschooling and juggling? And I'm just being checked in and felt like you're looked after as a human being. I don't know the rest of the world, but it just really dials up your discretionary effort and
For sure.
going to do the rest of the day, be it staying up late after your kids are in bed or juggling meetings with your kids coming in on your lap. I mean, there's so many new challenges. And when organizations just acknowledge them and still celebrate and support what you're doing, it means a lot.
We were talking about it in the green room before we went live, weren't we? That actually this has created a whole massive degree of empathy from leaders, because they're seeing what their colleagues, their team members, etc., are having to go through. But it's also a great leveler, because actually people are realizing that their boss, their senior colleague, whoever it might be, is going through all the same, excuse my language, shit they are at home and dealing with the same challenges. It's not they are human beings. And I think that is a great thing to bring people together in an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting, listening to Bryan and Charlotte and kind of being part of the debate. But, for me as well, as an employer, remembering a lot of these things and making sure that we are looking after our team in the right way and supporting people properly. I think everyone's in the same boat. So, making those calls to people and asking about their kids and checking in and seeing how things are going, it's so critical at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. The thing that our industry's banged the drum about for a while, not just during COVID, but way before COVID happens, and in fact any type of branding does the same. It's banging this drum about authenticity. Assuming that that's even more important now, how can organizations use their employees to help them bring their brands to life? Because I think they're the best example of authenticity, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, as humans, we have this kind of huge appetite for, peer reviews and hearing it from the horse's mouth. And, I wouldn't buy a coat for my daughter without reading reviews. I wouldn't book a holiday without reading the guest reviews and, sussing out if there's a pub in walking distance and all those important things. But, if you're thinking about a new employer, that is a massive purchase and you're going to want to do your due diligence as a candidate. And that's way more. And it's, Charlotte's made this point, Bryan's made this point. It's way more than the kind of corporate messaging and that kind of top down, this is the kind of message we're putting out there. You're really looking for the real story and you're trying to understand if you can fit. And, Bryan, you said thrive, and I love that. Where we are as a technology, we enable that. So we enable employers to have conversations with candidates in real time. It's such a simple premise, but it's such a brilliant thing. And, one of the top benefits of user-generated content is that it serves as excellent social proofing. Seeing content from real customers or candidates, real employees, it increases your credibility. It's believable. And then I suppose, unsurprisingly at the moment, we have a lot of employers asking us if we are going to kind of get into virtual engagement in terms of creating online events and so on and so forth. How do we do it? Clearly there's a tech piece, so how do you enable it? But actually, how do you curate something that is absolutely right for your audience? And kind of to your initial point, where authenticity is everything, how can organizations use their employees? I mean, that's a great way of using your employees. So we ran a really good session the other week. We did a webinar with a couple of our clients, Amazon, and they talked about how they use virtual events to engage with tech talent. And with Arab, and they talked about campus hiring. But actually, what they both talked about was the idea of bringing relevant people from their business to engage with candidates, because actually, ultimately, does a software engineer want to really hear from another software engineer about what the job's about and the granularity of it, and what does it feel like, and is it a big team, small team? All of those things that kind of speak beyond corporate messaging and job descriptions, they're looking for that conversation. They're looking for that level of detail. So it's not walking in people's shoes, really. So to me, that is a great way of using your employees to kind of really speak the truth.
Makes sense, absolutely. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Charlotte or Bryan?
I love a careers blog, and I love an authentic voice of associates and putting some time behind telling their stories. It's such a good engagement tool. People feel so special and honored when you ask to share their experiences. And we've been doing so much of that. And our content strategy has shifted a bit during this time, as it should, because we want to capture the times and the things that are on candidates' minds. But the way that you can repackage that content, there's just so much you can do with it. Of course, it's a source of a great ideal single link your recruiters can use in outreach, whether it's a relevant job description or geography or business unit. You can repackage it for CRM communications to nurture pipelines. You can push it out on your social media. You can share it internally to remind people the great work of the people sitting next to them.
Makes sense, absolutely. Brian, most experts are predicting that we'll be going through some level of disruption, that's social disruption, for at least another 12 months or so. And I guess much of that will mean more remote working, less face-to-face contact, etc. We're all going to have challenges to deal with, and those are going to be very different to what we had to deal with before. But whatever happens, the best, well, I assume here, the best employer brand, TA, recruitment teams, etc., will want to deliver an exceptional candidate experience. How can technology help us do that? And if so, how?
Well, I think in this sort of next normal, technology is essential. I think most people will agree. The recruitment industry in general is a little bit obsessed with technology. You know, there's more technology to take a stick at, but I think that won't stop until technology across the board is accepted as an enabler. And anybody in their tech stack, if there's an element of tech that is a prohibitor stopping you doing what you want to do to remove friction or become more memorable or live the authentic experience that you want to, then that needs to change. I think right now probably the key is being able to move with agility, deliver on the authenticity piece that we've just been talking about. Using the voice of the employee, and etc. I guess right now the important thing is to reduce friction and really bear in mind the extra considerations that are necessary for the candidate and the recruiter. Whenever we map candidate experience, we empathy map the recruiters and hiring managers, because it's got to be practical for them as well. But I constantly say, it's a mantra within PH. It's not the tools, it's how you use the tools. So once we get to the point where technology is widely available and accepted as benefiting the candidate experience, it then comes back to what's the human truth and how do we stand out with authenticity and differentiation to find people that are better culturally matched. So it goes around in a beautiful circle.
And that's the beauty of where humans add value in the future, doesn't it? If we automate the whole of the recruitment process in terms of the technical delivery of whatever it is we do, humans can do the interesting, sexy, creative stuff around that. So how are we telling our message? What are we saying? When are we saying it? And all those kind of good things that humans are good at. We're good at being creative. We're not so good at delivering communications to 10,000 candidates at once.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, people talk about, brands being more human. That doesn't mean it needs to be delivered by a human, because the human that's most important is the audience. So if we can deliver a very human experience for the candidate and use technology at the same time, that's okay. But the second it seems unauthentic or
I know what you're saying.
Easy for me to say.
I wouldn't even attempt it.
Well, I'm not saying it again. That's the bit where we need to go back to the drawing board. I'm surprised I recovered from that, to be honest. But I just wanted to be a bit human in this talk. But we've lost a few people, I think. That
We've actually gained one, Brian. Somebody must have heard about it. They've come to watch.
It's never been more socially acceptable to be vulnerable. I'm gonna own it.
You're living it right there.
Exactly. Listen, guys, I do have one more question that I want to ask each of you, but I wanted to run one final audience poll first. You should better access this now if everything works as it should. So I'm going to turn on the last poll. Has the magic happened? So this one is around, do you feel the COVID-19 crisis will have a lasting impact on your ability to attract top talent? The answers are yes, definitely. Yes, somewhat. No, not really. I'm not sure. Be interesting to see what comes out of this. It's easy to make a decision. These are not particularly difficult choices compared to some of the earlier ones.
Wow, this is surprising to me.
That's very surprising.
Yeah.
I wonder whether it's people think they're going to be overwhelmed with applications because there'll be so many more people on the market potentially. But that in itself is still an employer brand challenge, isn't it? As you, to your point, Charlotte, right at the very beginning about having too many candidates and how do you deal with that and deliver a great experience, because it's not going to be like that forever.
Right.
It's going to change, isn't it? So very interesting, very interesting. So my final question, we do have a few from the audience as well that we'll get to. And guys, if you're sitting there thinking, I'd love to ask Brian, Charlotte or Ali something, then do pop those into the questions and answer section, sort of the ask a question section at the bottom. But Charlotte, there's a risk in everything. And a good leader's role is to mitigate that as much as possible. What practical steps can employers be taking right now to kind of future-proof their organization, do you think?
It's a difficult one because the way that we treat one another has just become the most valuable currency in the world. And if your organization is not treating your people well and putting people first, it's going to have such a lasting impact on your reputation. And where you sit as an employer brand practitioner, you often don't have control over the people policies that are being made at your organization. But you can still share examples and remind people exactly what's at stake and examples of people who are getting it right and who are getting it wrong. So in the hopes of swaying people to make more people first decisions, I think early on when COVID was hitting, we were really surprised by how many public shaming sites came out. I remember Hung posted something in Brain Food, and it was a buyer beware website. All the stores on High Street were given a rating, good, fair, or bad, how they treated their employees during COVID, how they were let go, and in what manner. And then they said, stop buying their products and services if they got a bad rating. We saw companies like Bird do mass layoffs of people on a Zoom call with a bot, and there was no human interaction. The reaction to those brands that aren't treating people like human beings for so long. So the simple thing to do is if your company is treating people really well, is starting to document that. And whether or not you share it now externally doesn't matter. I would almost err that you don't share that stuff externally right now, but there will be a time everyone's going to have a COVID story. Decide how you want it to end and document it, because there will be a time when it really matters to candidates to recruit the people you need to grow and be successful. And if you can show that you demonstrated the empathy and compassion and the agility and some of those things that are top of mind to candidates, you'll have really engaging, interesting people to talk to.
It makes sense. And you always say you know who your real friends are during times of adversity and when you're struggling. And I think you know who the best employers are during those times as well.
I mean, Microsoft, they came out and they put everybody on 12-week parental leave. I mean, they knew ahead of the curve before anybody. Parents were struggling. They could not manage the workday and the homeschooling and the amount of exhaustion coming through. And rather than making it that prolonged period of agony, they said, we're putting all parents on 12-week leave. Go enjoy. And enjoy is the wrong word, but just to take that stress off your plate. Think about the little effects they're going to get from that.
It's a massive removal of pressure, isn't it?
Yes.
And Brian, same question to you.
So I guess what I'll add is I actually think this will be a huge catalyst for change. And I think when you look back through history in any different sector or industry, or even like world events that are business related, typically massive change or disruption comes because that people demand it, and it's audience derived. So I think this will be a catalyst for incredible change. Organizations who are organized and compassionate and empathetic, seeing this coming, will enjoy the spoils of this for many years because they've been seen as the organizations of choice. And I think we'll see underdogs rise to the top. I think we will see giants fall. And I think we'll see a gulf open up between those who are seen to prioritize their people. over organizations that prioritize profit. I think that's going to happen. And I also think, the flip side of that is organizations that will look back on this and wish they'd acted differently will be forced to change because the people demand it, and I think that's the top and bottom. And it's also one of the major benefits of having gone through this. It will be a catalyst for change.
Absolutely, I agree. And Ali, anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Charlotte and Bryan have summed it up so eloquently, and it's really interesting seeing the comments in the kind of chat panel down the side as well. To me, this is about and from a kind of with a tech lens. We've started working with clients where it would have previously taken us, 12 months to get through an InfoSec or compliance process, but actually, the organisations that have been ready to change and ready to embrace change have found ways of squashing those processes and really driving that change. And I suppose, for me, it's about reviewing what's been learned in this phase and actually, just really understanding what it's given you in terms of, speed, efficiency, the right tools to deliver those carefully curated messages that Charlotte and Bryan are talking about, how you take that to your audience. So actually, if you can create the technology stack that enables you to deliver that, then, you're in a better place. And also, necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it? So we've all found ourselves in incredibly unusual situations. As a owner of a technology business, I know other technology businesses are hugely struggling. We're not in that place at the moment. We've been fortunate because actually we have a product that people are excited about because it really fits what's happening right now. So we're trying to learn from that as well. So I think it's that whole being a compassionate partner, vendor, person in a relationship, client, candidate, employer, and then also just being really clear about the things that we've learned through this process and this time.
Excellent. Listen, that's fantastic. Thanks, guys. Thanks for asking all those questions that I had thought about before the day. And before we finish, though, we've still got a wee bit of time. I'd like to work through some of the questions from our audience, if that's okay. So let's see what we've got lined up. They are voted for, so we work from the top. And put your hands up if you want to answer this, unless I think one is very specifically well suited to you. So first one is, if pressure shows the real side of an organisation, will the current climate simply reveal those organisations that weren't authentic before? Who'd like that bad boy?
Go on, Ali.
I just wanted to say I don't know, I just equate all this to how we are as humans. And, if you are intrinsically a good and kind-hearted person, you kind of show your colours, really. And if you're someone who isn't behaving as they should behave, then, the truth will out. So I think those organisations, and some of the comments in the panel along the side about, people talking about Black Lives Matter and well-being and jumping on a bandwagon, it's just the worst of the worst, and those things will absolutely surface, I think, in these times. Anyway, put my hand down again now.
Bryan, Charlotte, anything else you want to add there?
Not me.
Yeah, I think just to sort of echo Ali's comments there, I think there is authentic organisations leading the way with compassion and living their values and their beliefs and acting accordingly. And then there are organisations jumping on a bandwagon because they smell a marketing opportunity. And the good news is, as an audience, we've got a lot better at sniffing that stuff out now. So, I just revert back to that sort of catalyst for change. You're going to be found out one way or another. And I do think the sort of final point on that for me is authenticity isn't just the truth about the good things. It's the truth. It's a 360, and people, when we do research, we always say, tell us how you feel on a typical day, on your worst day, and your best day, because or what do you admire in your peers? Because really, what that means are what are your values and behavior. So getting to the truth and using it for good, authentically, appropriately is it's essential. And hopefully the employer brand world will start to embrace a little bit more of that authenticity and this concept that we want to unleash on the world,
Excellent. So I think we've got time probably for a couple more. So next question, this is from Sam Monteith. We're heading for a big recession. Probably, possibly, we shall see. But let's work on the assumption that Sam's correct there. To what extent do the panel think candidates will trade stability/safety for any of the nice stuff? So is that going to outweigh everything, the stability piece, if we do go into a recession?
So I think in the short term, people want to pay the mortgage. I think somebody actually said that in the comments without a shadow of doubt. But taking our professional hat off for a second, I think we've probably all got friends and family that say, when this stuff's over, I'm out of here, So I think it would be a big mistake to assume that the people that you are still employing are going to stay, or that it's going to be easy to employ more people once you want to scale up. Once we're through that period of, am I going to be able to pay the mortgage? I think it'd be naive to also say, good organizations are going to get the best talent straight away, and organizations are, they're going to fail. I think that might happen over time, but people need to pay the mortgage first, necessity first, and then let's see how it plays out.
Yeah, we're operating at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs right now.
The same thing, yeah, for sure.
To tell you how to navigate an economic downturn in the middle of a pandemic, coupled with racial tensions and inequity and injustice, throughout the U.S., the riots and the backlash has been pretty extraordinary to see, and all of that combining together, people's priorities are shifting, and there's going to be more competition for jobs. I think if all things were equal and you had two opportunities and one company had a stability track record and the other was a small startup, all day long, anybody who's been through a negative event, being laid off, not knowing how they're going to feed their family or pay the bills, will take the one. The younger generation who hasn't gone through it, say they're just fresh grads, they might take the sexy startup, seeing the growth potential. So I think it's going to depend on how you were impacted and what you personally felt.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Absolutely. Did you want to add anything to that, Ali?
Yeah, I just perhaps following on from Charlotte's point, generationally, I think I think I read something just the other day on the Guardian website about the generation that's going to be most impacted from a prospects perspective is kind of 16 to 24-year-olds. And I spent some time with a couple of my son's friends the other day, so they're all kind of 18, 19, 20. So one's just in his first year at the end of university. One had hoped to take up an apprenticeship, which is now not open to him. And the other one is just looking for a job, and they're just so stuck. They're not sure what to do. Everything from the guy who's at university, and it's like, well, I don't even know whether I should go back after my first year and what that means. To the other two who are just kind of trying to find their way. But yeah, I think it's a challenging time, and people will respond to it, and we will all have different memories of this time, and that will impact the way we want to engage with organisations in the future, and how we rate them. And to Brian's point as well, Charlotte said the kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once you've paid the bills, if we're in 3 months, 6 months time, once we've got the ability to jump ship, we're going to be wanting to work for good guys.
I'd also add to that, once we're coming out of this, and people aren't sort of worried about the jobs and that kind of stuff, I think people are going to remember the likes of Airbnb, showing great courage in their vulnerability and dignity and compassion for how they treated the employees that they couldn't even keep hold of. But if Airbnb are in a tough spot in 4 months' time when people are able to travel, if they were to reach out to the world and say, hey, book Airbnb, or we're in trouble and we are going to lose more people, or we might go out of business, let's just see how the consumer sentiment has changed and what the people will do to rally to save that organization because of how they treated their people. And that's going to be really interesting to play out over the next 12 months.
Definitely, without a doubt. I think we've got time for one more, and I'm going to ask it because it's been voted for a couple of times. So Simon Halkyard would like to know, has what defines a stable industry been recalibrated now?
I think everything needs recalibrating right now. I think everything's up for debate. Everything's in flux. Everything's changed. I don't think you can assume that anything is particularly stable, apart from, certain industries are thriving, aren't they? But even within those industries, if you don't treat people well, you can't assume that you'll be stable for long, because people, yes, they want that stability, but, people want to work for organizations they believe in as well. So I would say all bets are off.
I mean, I think for those of us in the Fortune 500 sector, stock performance is still that key indication. And looking at organizations and the concessions they've had to make during this time versus companies that haven't asked their leaders to take a reduction in pay, haven't cut benefits. I mean, those are things that, probably aren't being talked about externally, but it matters a lot. I mean, most companies that are still doing well have asked their people to do something. And then there's other organizations that haven't. And I think looking at a lack of reduction in benefits or pay or vacation and all those other things is probably a key indication of some stability that hasn't been talked about a lot externally.
Makes sense. Absolutely. Anything you want to add, Ali?
Not really, because I think, again, Charlotte and Brian have summed it up. I suppose, Simon's talking about stability from an employer perspective, although I think one thing everyone will experience is, if they go back to their place of work, it will be very different from the place of work that they left 3 months ago. And that in itself provides a lack of stability. Actually everyone's starting from scratch. It's a kind of unknown again, really. Organisations that you might have thought were stable in the past won't have that sense of stability anymore.
Exactly. Listen, folks, I'm really mindful of time here. I'm an absolute stickler for not overrunning. I know people have got things that they'll need to get on with. I think I heard my wife shouting for my tea, in fact. But I wanted to finish up by summing up what we've heard today. We had some great advice from Brian on the necessity of a strong brand during a crisis and how tech can help us deliver that exceptional candidate experience. We heard from Ali on what smart employers are doing to engage with talent and how they can leverage their employers to bring their authentic brand to life. And Charlotte talked us through what a give and get employee brand is, why the concept is so disruptive, and of course how employers can stand up to the harsh realities of life and make a decision and take the actions to turn that adversity into strength. We covered a lot in a relatively short period of time, I think. Lots to take in, lots to take away and implement. And but before we finish, and I promise that's pretty much all you'll have to put up with from me, I wondered whether there are any kind of final remarks from our panel. Charlotte, anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
I just wanted to remind anyone who joined late, Brian and I are going to be looking on LinkedIn today. If you use the hashtag give and get and mention your favorite key takeaway from today, you'll be entered into a drawing to win a free copy of our new book. So please give us some LinkedIn love.
And the hashtag chat talent.
Alan will give you that too, or beer. Or with
Brian?
I just want to take a moment to thank Fiona, Jeremy, Simon, Stella, Ian, and Jimmy. I've been keeping an eye on the comments, Alison, Joe. We've had a really good conversation, but some real smart stuff in the comments.
Absolutely.
A really engaged audience. So I'd like to thank you for your involvement and contribution as well. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for stealing my thunder, Brian. That's my job.
Yeah, I was just going to then, sorry, Alan, let me wrap up then. I was just going to say, when you see the comments at the side, so I'm hoping there'll be a chance that we can kind of review those and read those. I've been trying to keep an eye on them as well. But yeah, just thanks for having us and really interesting discussion. Yeah,
we will be able to, absolutely. So cool. Listen, guys, we could talk about this stuff forever, but we don't have forever. So big thanks for the panel here. We've been fantastic. Big thanks to the audience for turning up, contributing, getting involved and being interactive. And a big thanks to everyone for supporting Chat Talent. It means a lot. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.